Like I didn't have enough nightmare fuel from the freaking Battle for Muni TV movie. This morning when I was scrolling through my feed, I saw a screenshot where it's Toffee when he was younger, sort of strolling on up, and there's a specific scene that zooms in on his freaking skull shoulder pads. And one of the skulls has spades painted on the cheeks. One of the skulls has freaking spades. And you know exactly what that means. That's the skull of Moon's mom. That's freaking morbid. Freaking morbid. I guess it also means that Muni Queens, the symbols aren't skin only. They go as far as the bone. I need to stop thinking about this. It's ridiculous that I find this so morbid when there's a lot worse in other cartoons. I've seen a lot worse. I frequent creepypasta from time to time, and when you look up the better stuff, in other words, the stuff that isn't Jeff the Killer brand over the top and obligatory gore, you can actually find some creepy bone-chilling shit. Even after frequenting that, this still kind of unnerves me on some level. The fact that there's a scene where they freaking zoom in on his shoulder pads. It's one thing that Toffee scene opens and he's introduced by coming out from a curtain of human skulls. That's one thing. But this detail is just that much more. Ugh. 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 Gah! Might as well just revisit the whole Toffee thing, since when it comes to discussing just how evil this guy is, or what kind of character he is, it's really in the details and how he interacts with other characters when you piece together every scene he's been in, everything he's done. Read some of the comments from the past, or from the blog I made the other day, and I'd like to use one of those as a springboard to kind of elaborate or further discuss this guy. So, the best description I've heard about Toffee is that he's a Magneto kind of villain. He does what he does for the sake of monster kind. He's the most extreme version of I'm going to get redemption and revenge for our people. I don't care who stands in my way. If you don't stand with me, you're against me, kind of thing. And some of the extremes that he went to, it seemed kind of self-serving in a way. Really, even though he does ultimately what he does for the sake of other monsters, if there was a monster that empathized with the humans, or rather the mutants, he'd toss him out of the way. Hell, he had no qualms about using Ludo as a meat puppet in order to regenerate. He had no qualms with shamelessly manipulating the guy. He had no qualms with breaking up Ludo and Buffrog and tossing Buffrog aside like a used tissue. He claims he's all for monsters, but he's absolutely cold, calculating, merciless. There's a good reason for why he was put behind the scenes over the course of Season 2. Why he was built up, sort of this threat in the background rather than in the forefront. Even in Storm the Castle, or rather the build-up to Storm the Castle, he was still a behind-the-scenes schemer. He prefers to sit behind the sidelines and manipulate things, to be standing from afar, to have a full battle vantage point or viewpoint of the playing field, to pull strings and get from point A to point B as far away from the actual battlefield as possible. He doesn't like to directly intervene with things unless he absolutely has to, or he's ready to. He's like a strategic chess player in how he approaches some of this stuff. Just, I guess, when you look at the scene where he's still the lizard, where he's the monster's biggest threat, their most intimidating player, this is a point where all the cards are dealt in his favor. He's made the Mumins back down. He's killed a Mumin queen. He has the upper hand. He doesn't have anything to lose by being out in the open. If anyone comes up and challenges him at this particular point in time, he can easily take him down. So, it really is a game changer when Moon comes in with Eclipsa's brand of magic. And this topples, quite possibly, what any reptilian Mumin would consider their ace in the hole, their ability to regenerate. Suddenly, they can't just regrow an arm or a leg. The Mumins have something that could lead to permanent death, or losing a limb indefinitely. And that's terrifying to them, considering this was their big advantage. This was probably what led to them gaining what kind of ground and advantage they had before. And one of the comments pointed out that Toffee probably went into hiding. The biggest reason was this particular magic popping up. Just considering there's always been some kind of magic that a Mumin could use in a battle against monsters. That was always some kind of upper hand, some kind of game changer. And even though he'd found a way to quell and suppress what Moon's mom was capable of, what previous generations of monsters had struggled with, even though he'd found a way to overcome that, Eclipsa's magic is a completely different level. They found something that's superior. They're always going to be one step ahead, no matter how much he thinks he knows about magic, no matter how much he's seen. There's always something else that comes into the picture. I'd say, looking at it from that particular point or perspective, that's what leads to Toffee's grand plan, where he infiltrates the wand and completely corrupts every source of magic that he can. If he corrupts and gets rid of all forms or sources of magic, that takes out the biggest problem in his battle against Mumins. If there's no magic, he's single-handedly powerful enough that he could take him down just by himself. If there's no magic, there's no challenge. There's nothing that can really thwart or oppose him. That's the entire point of the sequence where you have Moon and Marco coming up, trying to fight the guy, trying to take him down. He's won at that point. He's pretty much gained the upper hand. The plan that he's been sitting on his laurels and really fleshing out and developing for a long time has come to full fruition. It's probably kind of ridiculous on my part to unpack or discuss Toffee's motivations or his role as a villain in this particular respect, since, well, if a person watches the show from the point he's introduced in fortune cookies, it's probably just a matter of watching through the episodes and just keeping a specific eye on Toffee and how he reacts, what he does. I guess I'm just fascinated by what kind of villain he is, just how much of a game changer he was for Star Versus in regards to tone and mood. You start with the, for lack of a better term, the jobber villain. This is a term borrowed from wrestling. It's the villain that's meant to be set up to fail. The fool. The one that, if he comes into the ring, if he or she comes marching into the ring, you know they're gonna get defeated, or they're just there to make the hero look good, or they're there for comedic effect. That's what kind of villain role Ludo had. The first season set up the more lighthearted and fun aspects and elements of the show. Just the battle between Star and Ludo, it was meant to be fun and campy and the traditional good versus evil kind of setup. Star was always going to win in that particular kind of setup. You see that subverted a little bit, or kind of overthrown, since Ludo does get character development, and there's a lot more to him than just being the jobber villain. But Toffee really is the game changer. It shows what level this show is willing to go to in regards to exploring what kind of political background humans and monsters have, just how deeply entrenched it is, how far they're willing to push their antagonists and villains on this show. Toffee is part of a bigger thing, part of a bigger background, part of the plot. You see a lot of focus, or some key emphasis, on the humans versus monsters setup. Mutapendence Day is one of the key episodes in this, where you have Star reconsidering her lifelong stance on monsters are evil, and just how much propaganda has been shoved in her face. Just the children's book alone says a lot. When you have the knights portrayed as these giant, intimidating, powerful, glorious figures, and the monsters portrayed as these tiny, weak, scrawny things. You have this particular theme brought up again, and how tense the interactions between Moon and Ludo's parents are. And the most recent TV movie, when you have Buff Frog showing the monsters equivalent to human board games and stories and that kind of thing. How he and Moon reached a point of contention over opinions or viewpoints they'd taken for granted of humans and monsters over the years. Kind of reached a point of contention and then found common ground, being parents concerned about their kids. This has been something that's brought up several different times. If anything, Toffee is one of the biggest centerpieces. He's one of the big focal points for this, how strained the relationship between humans and monsters are. He's the extreme, the most extreme a monster can get in their sheer, utter hatred for humans and what they've done to monsters. He's willing to go to the most dire extremes to gain, quote-unquote, retribution or revenge. I guess, if anything, I thought it'd be interesting to discuss Toffee in this kind of light, paint sort of a character portrait of him, ever since Storm the Castle, he's just fascinated me. He fascinates me as a villain. He's one of the more competent and well-written villains I've seen in a cartoon. Well, a cartoon in the same vein as Star Versus. The series is kind of episodic, has an overarching storyline and that kind of thing. And in regards to how far they're willing to push the envelope in what he can say and do. Another cold, calculating villain, or one of the closest I can think of that be in the same vein of writing to Toffee, would be Chase Young from Shaolin Showdown, though definitely not with the politics that fuel Toffee, where he's a result of that kind of political tension, or he's kind of an extra focal point or something like that. Just the idea of a cold, calculating, competent villain that whenever they come on screen, you're expecting a more serious story. You're curious as to what direction they're going to take with them. This is a big bad to keep an eye on. where the show's going to take a few risks or do something that they wouldn't normally do if it's just a fun, lighthearted episode, that kind of thing. Considering just how far they were willing to go with Toffee or how he's set up, I'm really curious as to what they're going to do with Eclipsa. They already set up just how far they're willing to go. That you have a villain that wears human bones as part of his costume. He takes pride in killing his enemies and wearing them as victorious trophies. He's okay with using members of his own kind to gain what he wants. I'm almost kind of curious as to how much further they'd be willing to go with Eclipsa, or what they're going to intimate there. Because so far, the most we know about her is that she came up with her own dark, corrupted kind of magic. That she's deceitful and underhanded, willing to strike a pretty damning deal with someone in her own family line if it means gaining her freedom. That there's probably no restrictions onto who she'll strike a deal with and why. I almost kind of see her as in the same vein as a deceitful genie character, willing to, well, if you strike a deal with her or ask her for a favor, it's not going to end in your favor, or something like that. I have a feeling that the emphasis with her is going to be, you really have to be careful around her, that she has a silver tongue, that she can charm her way out of most situations. She can coax somebody into doing something they probably wouldn't otherwise do, that kind of thing. I'm kind of wondering if she's going to be a Bill Cipher kind of villain. That's just the vibe that I'm getting so far.